And it's not every day you're in the New York Times. So me, your mom, and a few other people have to let you know how proud we are of you. So that was really cool. Congratulations. And thanks everyone here for sending that bus that kind of shows you the power of local organizing and how we in the New York metro area can make a difference to Democrats all across the Northeast. So thank you for that. That was really a really cool win for Senate Democrats and other states. So I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman. I know a lot of you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to see new organizing. We're seeing it in other places. Our terrific Congressman Jerry Nadler and our Assemblymember Dick Gottfried and our Councilmember Corey Johnson are all participating in, whether it's Indivisible or other groups that are organizing in response to the Trump. But it's also important that we organize around party politics, because at the end of the day, that is what it's going to be about. And the groups like Indivisible are really key in kind of soliciting participation. But we got to redirect that energy to the midterms. We got to redirect that energy to the gubernatorial races. We got to redirect that energy to the state senate races. So this is a foundation that's going to be very important. But my charge here today is to tell you how I think you can help Trump-proof New York. And we've got some work to do, because I think, as some of you know and some of you don't know, we live in a state that has a legislature that's actually divided between Democrats and Republicans. The 150 members of the state assembly are safe Democrats. They have a supermajority. We have no danger of losing that seat, that chamber, to Republicans. However, on the other side of the Capitol, where I serve in the state Senate, the Republicans actually control it. And currently they control it by just one Senate seat. One Senate seat. And to make matters worse, that Senate seat is actually held not by a Republican, but by a Democrat who sits with the Republicans. Now, only in Albany would the Republican majority be possible by a Democrat. And in addition to that, his name is Simcha Felder. He's from Brooklyn. He is also responsible for the legislation that overturned the city council bill that would have saved $10 billion plastic bags being thrown away. That bill that overturned the city council's 5-cent bag fee. So he's a piece of work. He's an interesting fellow. We've got to work on him. He needs to come home to the Democratic Party. In addition to Senator Felder, we have a number of breakaway Democrats. Now, these are Democrats who don't sit with the Democratic Conference. They form their own conference called the Independent Democratic Conference. And there's 8 of them, and for us, it's another challenge as Democrats. So not only do we have to win seats from Republicans, but apparently we have to win seats from Democrats in order to get the chamber back. The only people benefiting from this arrangement, of course, are the Republicans. And not just the Republicans, but it's the real estate lobby, it's the the corporate lobby, it's oil and gas that actually campaigned against the plastic bag fee, had lobbyists spend hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last couple of years in Albany to defeat the plastic bag fee. So the electoral map is kind of crazy. But again, if we can send folks outside of the state to win Senate seats elsewhere, hopefully we can send them within New York State and we can win some more seats back. But we're going to do that, I think, not by running away from core Democratic issues, not by trying to pretend that we're independent Democrats or sitting with Republicans, but by being who we are, real Democrats. Real Democrats. And that goes to some of these issues that I'd like to think can help us protect the state of New York against Donald Trump. Now, the first one is a bill that I wrote. And I'm kind of proud of it because of the acronym, among other things. The bill is Tax Returns Uniformly Made Public Act. Yes. And the bill has really ignited a conversation, I'm happy to say, and my chief of staff, Peter Jamie, is here. He's viewed it, and we have that bill. But it would require presidential candidates who want to qualify for the New York ballot to release their tax returns, to actually release 5 years of their tax returns before they can make it on the ballot. And we can do that in New York State. We can set our own ballot requirements. And since I've introduced the Trump Act, 19 other states have introduced their own version, and 2 states have considered it. And the way I'd like to think about it is that all we need is really one state to actually pass it. Because a presidential candidate is not going to forego all those electoral votes, but also all those popular votes. Because they may not win California, but they want to win a lot of votes in California. And they, you know who I'm talking about. So the Trump Act is one thing that we can do at the state level to draw a line in the sand that we demand as New Yorkers to know of any potential conflicts of interest that candidates for president of the United States have. So, to that end, the City Council is actually, we're having a press conference with City Council Member Andy Cohen next week on Thursday, and other council members who support this. And I've got some flyers I'll leave, but anyone who wants to come by, it's Thursday, March 16th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the council is going to pass a resolution in support. So I have an assembly sponsor, and I'm going to have to continue to push both in my chamber and, of course, in the assembly. But we want to get the governor to support this. We want, as I said, other states to support this. And I'm really hopeful that it can make a difference. The New York Times editorialized on it. They got a constitutional scholar to vet it. And so I think it's got real potential. So that's one. 2, something that's near and dear to my heart, the LGBT community. You know, in Albany, it's a struggle for a lot of things. It's particularly a struggle for LGBT folks. Even though we passed marriage equality in 2011, the first legislature to do so, which is a really big deal, since then, since 2011, not one piece, not one iota, not one piece of legislation has passed the New York State Senate or even made it to the floor that has the acronym or the words LGBT in it. They have blackballed gay and lesbians. Now, the reason some people speculate is that the Republicans, have primaries every year from their far right wing, the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party has said they will not support any Republicans. You know, the Conservative Party is a third party that will endorse Republicans, so they get an additional line on the ballot. Like the Working Families Party is for a lot of progressives, the Conservative Party is for a lot of Republicans. So they will not endorse any Republicans who support gays or lesbians. And you know what? The Republicans basically have said that's okay by us because they will not bring any legislation to the floor that involves LGBT folks. And it's so extreme that last year there was a resolution on the floor after the Orlando massacre. And I was actually pleasantly, heartened, surprised that the Republicans would be passing a resolution on that tragedy because it's so important, obviously, to many communities, including the Latino community, and of course, it goes to the issue of guns and violence in our society. And I was heartened until I read the resolution. The resolution made no mention whatsoever of LGBT people. It made no mention of Latino people. It was sanitized of all humanity. That's because they want to protect their right flank from the Conservative Party. The second bill that I actually passed last year involved the Stonewall Inn, that everyone knows where that is, of course, down in the Village, the birthplace of the modern LGBT human rights movement. We passed legislation to enable that historic site to be granted to the federal government to be made a national monument, which it is today. But as part of that deal, they would not let me use the term LGBT in that bill. They would not let me refer to those events of 1969 in that bill. They would not let me make any mention of gays or lesbians, transgender folks who are at the heart of that struggle in that bill. It's shocking. So we have to do more work, clearly, on LGBT rights, particularly with the Trump administration. Now, one of the things we can do, and this is, I think, a revelation for a lot of folks, also who believe we live in this great progressive capital, is that we can make certain that transgender people have the same rights as everyone else. Transgender people are excluded from New York's human rights law, specifically excluded, and we've never redressed that. Add to that Donald Trump just pulled the rug out from under transgender kids who are no longer protected by Title IX in our public schools. So we need to pass the Gender Equality Non-Discrimination Act, also known as GENDA, and we also need to pass legislation that would codify, that would put into law the protections that the Obama administration gave transgender kids, that allows them privacy in public schools, that allows them to use the facilities of their choice in public schools, that doesn't make them feel like freak shows among their friends and teachers. So we need to pass Title IX protections. That's legislation that is there. Third, climate change. I just came from a conference at NYU, conclave of students, the hip-hop community actually, thinking about how they can change the language around climate so we can win it, for our future. I mean, the consequences, everyone knows, are dire. We're facing rising sea levels. The spring itself, I think, has been indicative of something amiss. The fact that weather patterns have changed dramatically throughout the Northeast is a harbinger of things to come. On the floor of the Senate, though, I actually debated a colleague as to whether climate change was caused by humans or not, on the floor of the New York State Senate. And it wasn't just anyone, it was the deputy leader of the Republican Congress. He stood for 45 minutes and debated me about the scientific basis of climate change. And of course he said, I'm not a scientist. Well, as they say, well, if you're not a scientist, then you better well talk to one. Because we have to fix this, and we need, in New York, to pass a comprehensive climate change act like California has done 5 years ago. We haven't done that in New York. And we need to push back on oil and gas. We won the fracking battle, thanks to a lot of people here. But the new landscape of oil and gas since the new EPA director came in feels really frightening. Just this week he said carbon dioxide was not responsible for climate change. He said that. Or he didn't know. Again, he didn't know. So the oil and gas lobby, by the way, was up in Albany campaigning against the plastic bag fee.
Sure.
Because it takes, billions of gallons of oil to make all these plastic bags that we use. So we have to pass a comprehensive climate change regulation. Fourth is something that I feel very strongly about, which is vaccines. We have this anti-science attitude in Washington now. We have a president who believes that vaccines are linked to autism. Every scientific study shows otherwise. And New York needs to stand up for science, whether it's on climate change or vaccines. Whether it's on gay conversion therapy. The leader of one of the leading gay conversion therapists just died the other day. I'm sorry to say that he did not see New York ban gay conversion therapy. Once again, we cannot ban it in New York. Every other state in the Northeast has banned gay conversion therapy. Do people know what that is? That therapists, licensed by the state of New York, will take kids into their office and try to convert them.
That's what Mike Pence believes.
It's frighteningly similar to what Mike Pence believes. It involves a lot of heinous and absolutely inhumane. It's child abuse. That's exactly what it is. And the Republicans in Washington, and apparently the Republicans in Albany, want to keep us from outlawing it. Now, I think one of the reasons is there's a lot of people who are making money off of it. They're actually applying for Medicaid, which the governor's trying to stop, to his credit. But it's an issue of child abuse. It's also an issue of consumer protection, because there's a lot of well-meaning parents who are being misled into believing that they can have their kids converted, because for some communities it's difficult to come out. But again, the science is clear, just as it is on vaccines, just as it is on climate change. And so we've got to keep pushing back, and we got to ban gay conversion therapy in New York. Guns. Now, we've got the most pro-NRA administration in history. No question about that. New York has a really good law in place called the SAFE Act. Some of the most restrictive regulations around guns. So we're thankful for that. But the problem is all these illegal guns come in from out of state. They come up from the South, from Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, along with something they call the Iron Pipeline. Literally, gun shows and folks stealing guns, send them straight up to New York, where they're sold on the street and result in crimes and murders here. So we need to do more to protect New York from guns. There's legislation that I carry that would actually impute liability to, for example, an individual who leaves their gun unlocked in a cabinet. Somebody gets it, shoots someone, oftentimes a child accidentally. That person whose gun it is should be made to pay. Yeah. Another thing about that, the NRA has done an incredible job at keeping research, and this goes back to science, preventing research around gun violence and deaths. So you know what we can do in New York? We can pay for that gun research ourselves. We can figure out in New York why, how, and when illegal guns come. We can tax bullets. We can tax guns themselves and pay for scientific research that'll help bolster the case for stronger gun laws in New York. So that's legislation that I'm happy to support as well. And then finally, and I think this is on a lot of people's minds, the Affordable Care Act. You know, once you're ready to call it Ryan Care or whether you call it Trump Care, once that passes or some iteration of it, 3 million New Yorkers could lose their insurance overnight. So we got to figure out health insurance for ourselves. Washington's not going to do it for us any longer. So we need to pass Dick Godfrey's single payer bill. It is more efficient, it's more responsible, and it is prudent given the current political climate that we look after the most vulnerable in our society. And the only way we're going to do that is if our state plays more of a role than just convening a marketplace, but it actually helps expand Medicaid to the people who need it most. Well, the single payer bill is carried by Dick Godfrey in the state assembly, and I can give you the Senate and Assembly number.
The New York Health Act.
The New York Health Act. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. That's what it's called.
Can you get that info added to their email?
Absolutely.
We can follow up on that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So those are a few areas. Clearly, you know, it doesn't stop there though. And the two biggies that I didn't mention, and we can talk about more: women's reproductive health.
Yes.
New York State has the laws on reproductive health that date to 1970. Roe v. Wade was decided by the Supreme Court in 1974. If we lose Roe, if the Supreme Court overturns it, we go back to 1970.
Right.
We don't have any protections. There are, this is really shocking, but it's true. I was told this by a healthcare provider. There are physicians in parts of New York where, presented with a case of someone who is seeking an abortion, have to actually get on the phone and call the district attorney because New York State's laws are so vague. We have not modernized our laws on reproductive health, so we are using old law. And it didn't used to be much of a concern until this administration, which is made it its top priority to overturn Roe, to defund Planned Parenthood, to limit health care access for women generally. So we need to pass that. And then finally is the concern around HUD, and that concerns a lot of people in the area. And I can't imagine ever being operated on by Ben Carson. There's someone's intelligence is usually indicated by the way they're able to put together sentences. And they say he's an esteemed neurosurgeon, but he doesn't know a damn about housing policy, and that is very clear. So we're facing massive cuts to our public housing stock, upwards of $35 million, like instantly, and that can be done by presidential fiat. Doesn't require any congressional approval. And we're facing the absolute uncertainty around HUD. and the protections that it provides to us here. So New York has to get its act together. We are convening talks with the mayor and the governor on protecting our Section 8, our HUD tenants, our public housing residents from cuts. I know Mayor de Blasio has said a lot about it, but Albany's going to have to play its part. Albany has kind of kicked the can down the road on public housing in particular, and even though it is a state authority, we've relegated the discussion to the city, but the stakes are too high and the money's just too much for the city to handle alone. So I'm hopeful that Albany's going to play a bigger role in that. All to say that we have to be vigilant, we have to be activated, we have to be focused on each and every one of these issues. We have to win the midterms, but we also have to win the battle of ideas. And frankly, I think that's one of the reasons why we Democrats didn't do so well last time. We need to be able to distill our arguments, not in, a policy document, not even in a couple of paragraphs, but we need people to understand our ideas in a few words. We need people to know that Democrats represent working people. Democrats support the most vulnerable. Democrats want to provide health care for all. And Democrats want a multicultural society where we protect our immigrants and welcome them to become citizens. So thank you so much. I'm happy to take some questions.
Senator's been so kind with so generous with his time so far.
My time is cheap, let me tell you.
Great. I'm going to lead off. Sure. I know myself, and I'm sure everyone else in here, we're riled up from everything that you've just said. We want to do something to support you in all of these efforts that you're doing. So we are so fortunate that we have you and Assemblymember Gottfried and Congressman Adler, such fantastic progressive representatives. What can we do, even though we have such amazing representatives, to support you in your efforts in all these different ways you're trying to help?
Thanks. Well, I'd love to see some of you at this press event. I'd love to see you guys go online and talk about the Trump Act. I think it's a really good talking point for Democrats at the state and local level to kind of, shine the light on the issue of conflicts of interest. I mean, what we're hearing, what we know and what we don't know about Trump's conflicts and Russian connection and stealing our election, stealing our Supreme Court nominee. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I would say, this Thursday would be a good start for me. There's also a change.org petition. If you just Google change.org Trump Act, I'd love, to see folks in the neighborhood sign it. We have over 135,000 signatories in support of the Trump Act. That's one thing. And two, continue to do what you're doing in terms of organizing around Democratic Party politics. Look, Albany needs you. The corruption, the self-dealing, the lack of courage on the part of the legislature and everyone is it's an ongoing joke. So unless we infuse our local politics with new ideas and new people, we're going to just expect more of the same. So get involved, run, like President Obama said, grab a clipboard, run for office, not necessarily against me, but get involved to continue to do what you're doing.
I just have hi, Brad. Thanks
Hi.
for coming. I just, we all have to have insurance to drive our cars. I'm sure that wasn't easy to make that happen when it first came in. We didn't always have to have insurance to drive our cars. Why can't we require that anybody who owns or possesses a gun, I mean, just possesses it, has it in there, why can't we require them to have insurance on that?
We have legislation like that.
I'd like to see that get
Yes.
a lot of play.
Yes.
Because it doesn't deny their right to have that gun.
Yes.
They just have to own it responsibly.
That's right, that's right. And that's, I carried a bill that would, in effect, the liability, third-party liability legislation, in effect requires that.
Exactly the situation you
Yes,
mentioned.
yes.
Yeah.
So we can do that. Other states have done it. But once again, we got to win back the state Senate before we can get gun legislation, choice legislation, LGBT legislation, climate legislation, before we can win back control of our own rent laws, which is a big issue. Not a federal one necessarily, but one that remains unfinished business in Albany. The fact that the chairwoman of the Senate Housing Committee, which oversees our laws involving rent stabilization, she lives closer to Montreal than she does to New York City. So, and she has no rent stabilized tenants in her district. So, we got to win this state back for Democrats. And so that you're absolutely right there. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm always asking every question. Hi.
Hi.
We met at the Hate in America town hall that you have.
Yes, thank you.
And I just wanted to know what specific...
Yeah, it's called Hate in America, not Hate America.
Hate
Yes.
Yeah.
I already hate America. That'd be fodder for the far right.
I want to know what we can do specifically to help our legislators pass single payer in New York State.
Thank you. That's Dick Godfrey's legislation. There is a petition. There is a website for single payer. We can get you that information. The Senate Democratic Conference just endorsed it last week, which is a big deal. But here's the reality, though. It's a great bill. Dick has done amazing work in the Assembly. He's got the Assembly kind of on lockdown with the concept. We got to win the Senate back once again in order to move that legislation to the floor for consideration. So what you can do is help us win some Senate seats back in a year's time. And there's a lot of talk of that happening. I'd be happy to talk to this team about plugging you in to places where you can volunteer, where you can make telephone calls, where you can recruit candidates. I'm on the committee for the State Democratic Campaign Committee, where we're trying to recruit candidates. If you have a smart, capable friend in the Hudson Valley who wants to grab that clipboard, this is the time to do it. This is the time to run for state senate. There's a man named Bill Larkin. He just had his 89th birthday. He's a Republican. God bless him. 89 years. And I don't think he's going to be serving in the Senate for a decade longer. I don't know how much longer. But frankly, it's time for him to go, and it's time for us to elect a Democrat in that district, among others, including Long Island. So we should get connected on that, on all those fronts.
Does that include Catskills?
Yes. Yes.
I have another question, sir. What about the Americans with Disabilities Act? Are they going to leave?
I haven't heard anything to that effect coming out of Washington, but I have heard that we're going to have a less, aggressive enforcement of the ADA, and that's the real problem. It's going to be hard for them to overturn it. It's a very popular piece of legislation for obvious reasons, but we're going to have a Justice Department. We saw the absolute massacre that just occurred yesterday with U.S. attorneys all across the country. So we're going to have to figure out how that's going to be enforced and what we can do about it to respond, again, at the state and local level.
So I think we're just going to do one more question, but if you have a question and it didn't get answered, come up to me, we will write it down, and we'll be in touch with Senator Hoylman's office, and we'll get answers to all the questions that you have, even if they didn't get answered here tonight.
Are you implying we can't do anything about the insurgent Democrats in the Senate?
Am I implying that you can't?
Because you were talking about Republicans, but it seems to me that the real problem is the insurgent Democrats.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's both problems. We're fighting a two-front war, you know. We gotta, either those Democrats have to come back, or we gotta
We don't
take them
want
out.
them back.
I mean, that,
We don't
you know,
want them back,
so,
Brad.
what's that?
We don't trust to have them back.
So this is a point of reckoning for the state Senate Democrats. We have to they either coming back and forming a coalition or a conference with us, or we have to run races against them. I think it's pretty clear. So we're coming to that point, and we in the weeks and months ahead where that decision is going to be made. Look, a lot of them are very popular in their elections.
Jeff Bond is the perfect example.
And so the question is, you know, do we have limited resources as Democrats. We always do. We don't have the real estate lobby. We don't have hedge funds which are supporting charter schools, which want to undermine the fundamentals of our public education system. We don't have that money. So we have to use it wisely. Are we going to spend all that money running against our own people who may come back to us eventually? Or are we going to spend the money toward Republicans? Now, that decision is going to be made very shortly, but I rule out nothing. I think anyone that doesn't conference with mainline Democrats will be subject to a challenge. I think that's not coming from me or from the Democratic Party. That's coming from the people.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to speak to this for a second. Thank you for everything that you laid out. But this movement against the IDC is really organic, and there's a number of groups, and it's an all fronts attack on the IDC. Rise and Resist, as I mentioned before, is doing protests at their office every 2 weeks. March 10th was Diane Savino's protest, which she's in Staten Island. I attended Tony Avella's protest. I marched around in a circle in front of his office and yelled at the top of my lungs, and then I got invited into his office to have a conversation with him. And let me tell you, my tone was very pointed with Tony Avella. And I said to him, I want you to bring your caucus back to the mainline Democrats. I want Democrats to caucus with Democrats. And he said something along the lines of like, well, you know, if you bring me a deal, we'll consider it. So my response was, no, you need to do this. You're supposed to be a leader. You lead it. So Rise and Resist is doing the protest.
Can we have their email?
Can I just
Yes.
Rise and Resist is doing the protests. United Direction is doing strategizing in every district that has an IDC member. And there's a group called No IDC that is actively recruiting primary opponents to every single IDC member. So the movement is alive and it's active, and there's a distribution of labor. But you can talk to me, or you'll get more information with a follow-up about how to plug in. If you want to raise your voice at their offices, if you want to get engaged at the local level in their districts, that's a good approach. Or if you want to strategize about how to best, or if you want to try to persuade them to return to the mainline Democrats, that's another. So it's an all-out war on them that I think collectively we have realized that this is not the time for a fractured Democratic representation in Albany. We need a united front against the regime's agenda.
Thank you. But I think we have to end. But please, if you have any more questions, please make sure they're given up to us, and we'll make sure to catch them on. Big hand of applause.
Yes.
Thank you.